Good evening, ladies. If you're just coming in, grab your name tag, grab some food, grab some drinks, come have a seat. We're excited to get started tonight. Well, if I haven't met you before, my name is Jessica. I'm the Women's Ministry Director here and the host of Story Night, which is a huge, huge, huge passion of mine. And before I start, I would like to just go ahead and ask for your grace. I'm technically still on maternity leave and a little bit sleep deprived. So we're going to do the best we can tonight. And I'm so excited that you get to hear Cindy's story. I scheduled her specifically because she has done this before, which made my life a little bit easier as I pop out of maternity leave and go back in. But for those of you who are brand new, I just want to give you a big welcome. And in fact, if you've never been to a story night before, would you just raise your hand? You don't have to do anything special. Welcome. Thank you for being here. We're so excited. I know some of you have heard this 14 times before, but bear with me. So Story Night is something that was birthed back in Santa Barbara, and the idea was just to let women share their life stories. This is not a sermon, it's not a fundraiser, it's really not a retreat, it's not a Bible study. This is just your chance to hear somebody share her story. And every story is completely different. We've had every kind of topic. We've had women from different backgrounds and different ages all share their story. So I'm excited that you get to be here tonight for Cindy's story. And we want you to know that this is for all of you, no matter what. Whether you've ever stepped foot in a church building before or not, we're glad you're here, and we want you to feel welcomed and included, and hope you get some encouragement out of tonight's story. So the whole idea is that this is real women, real stories, real hope. These are real women. These are not like paid professionals who come in to give a story. These are real stories. They're just sharing their lives with you. Imagine that you're sitting at coffee with somebody and you actually have an hour to hear all about her life, which is kind of the point of tonight. And this is also about real hope. Now, all of the stories have some significant suffering in them. We do have tissues on the table if there's an emotional trigger, or if you feel like crying, that's totally normal. And we just invite you to sit through, because we leave every story with hope. We don't leave you in the suffering. Now, some of you know that there is a podcast. We have a Story Night podcast. So if you want to know more about what Story Night is, you can listen to episode 1. It gives the whole story. And it has now gone into over 80 countries, which is kind of fun. Yeah. Some of you sitting here, in fact, I might put you on the spot. Raise your hand if your story is on the podcast, because there are a few of you. Yeah, look around. Oh, hi. Our previous Story Night speaker just walked in. Good to see you. So there are some flyers on the table if you want to grab that. They're on, the Story Night podcast is on any of your favorite podcast platforms. You can share that with somebody. This is a great thing to do, especially if you know a woman who's going through something specific, whatever that is, whether that's cancer or divorce or abuse. There's probably a story on the podcast about that, and that maybe that woman would like to hear that story and find some hope there. Okay, so we're going to kind of start talking about seasons. Our wonderful worship leader shared a slide that I thought was brilliant, and it had to do with the seasons of Oregon. Now, I came from 16 years in Santa Barbara where there was one season. 70 degrees and partly cloudy, 365 days a year. So we came here, and there we found a whole lot of seasons, which is what we wanted. I mean, we wanted 4 seasons. We didn't realize we were going to get 11. But some of you will resonate with this, right? All of the seasons of Oregon. And this is perfect timing. I mean, I didn't plan this, but today seems to be like a little bit of a change, right? Like we're on the last week of winter, and we actually can feel spring today, right? In case you didn't notice, you have both snowflakes and tulips on your table. On purpose. So big shout out, thank you to the ladies who cut out the snowflakes and brought the tulips. Thank you so much. Okay, so I have, just for our little conversation time around the table, some questions for you about seasons, right? If you were to invite somebody to visit Oregon for the first time, when would you want them to come visit? Like, would you tell them to come visit in spring or in summer, and why? And so this is just a fun chance to get to know the ladies around your table and talk a little bit about the seasons of Oregon before we continue.
And I'm Brooke. would you want someone to visit? I don't think the question's like that.
All right, ladies. Hopefully you got some good ideas. Maybe you even heard something that you didn't know was available in one of the mini seasons of Oregon. Just out of curiosity, did anybody hear anything at the table that they feel like the whole room should hear? Some wonderful idea, something special you could do? Yes. I'm coming to you.
Come to church on Wednesday.
Any season. We do that all year long, right? Anything else that came up in your seasonal conversations that was a really good, especially for anybody who's kind of newer to Oregon, that should be shared out? Okay. I know that when we first moved here, we learned about the Tulip Festival. And we had some friends from Southern California come up and visit who didn't realize that there would be this thing that comes from the sky called rain, and that it makes the ground wet. Does not exist in Southern California. And so walking through the mud, our very LA friend ended up putting plastic bags around his shoes to trek through the mud. So it's fun. It's fun bringing people to Oregon. We love it. But in all seriousness, we're going to kind of shift gears and talk about the seasons of your life. We've been kind of having fun talking about the weather seasons and all that's going on. But tonight's story definitely covers some of those different seasons. And I know that some of you have walked in and you might be in a wonderful season of your life. Praise the Lord. Some of you walked in and maybe you're in like the longest winter you feel like you have ever been in, and will spring ever come. We want you to know that you're not alone in that. And I'd like to invite up Heather. Heather is the daughter of our speaker. You'll notice that right away when you see them next to each other. And not only is she going to perform the opening song for us, but then she's going to go straight into introducing her mom. So we get to hear a little bit about Cindy directly from Heather. And she's chosen a song that I think is perfect for this. It's called Seasons. And I hope the lyrics just bless and encourage you as we just enter into this time of hearing music and hearing Cindy's story. Thank you, Heather.
Thanks.
Like frost on a rose, winter comes for us all. Oh, how nature acquaints us. Yeah, thanks for listening to that little ditty. Kind of sums up just seasons of life. And as I think about my mom, you know, we're not sisters, even though she looks really young. Many people will ask us. But anyway, when I think of a few things about her, where I work with a bunch of college girls, and they just love it whenever she's around. And they've kind of developed this thing, they call it Cindy Bingo, because she has certain catchphrases that she will throw out there. And if you know her for maybe an hour, you might start picking up on some of them. So I dare you to start your own little Cindy Bingo list of catchphrases. But one thing I just really appreciate about Mom is, I don't remember really exactly when she started saying this, but, you know, her life has just been all out for the Lord. You're going to get to participate in that tonight and hear about the wonderful things that God has done in her life. But I remember a few years ago, she just started having this attitude when people would ask her to share her story, and she'd say, "Why wouldn't I? Why wouldn't I?" And I think that that's just such a powerful, it's a posture of the heart to say yes to the Lord when he's asking us to do stuff. And so I just love it because so many people, myself included, just benefit from the wisdom that she has, but also that willing heart, even as she gets older, even though she looks awesome and young, just even when a lot of people are just don't want to do things anymore or walk down those roads that are painful, she's willing to go down them if they will bring freedom to someone else. And I raise my hand. I want to be that type of woman that will be willing to use whatever suffering that's been in my life if it's going to help someone else and bring glory to the Lord. So that's what you're in for tonight.
I promise I didn't pay her for a single thing.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. How fun just to have just like to Susan Silva. I mean, years and years of knowing each other and our families, and even coming up for the last story night, you know, just feeling so at home tonight. I feel like, oh goodness, I get to tell my story to my friends. So glad to be here. Glad, you know, every time I have the privilege of doing this, it is a time of how God reminds me over and over again how hugely praise and thanksgiving have impacted my life, how the truth of God's word and the discipline of prayer over the years, and you're going to see, I've never done a slideshow before, so, you know, bear with me with this, and actually, pictures have been a trigger for me for the last 22 years, so I have all kinds of albums, and I hardly ever get into them because they are a trigger. But I knew that God was asking me to do this when Jess brought it up. And it was actually, Harley helped me put this together the other day, and we spent like 5 hours going through mounds of photos. And when I didn't get triggered. It was so healing, and I thought, whoa, you've got something new and great for this time. You know, and that's the way he works. It's like each time he has a new glimpse or a new corner that he's gonna work in. My kids, I always thought, didn't you think when you had kids that you were going to be the mom and you were going to have all the wisdom and you were going to teach them? And then all of a sudden, I had these kids that were incredibly wise and they were passionate for the Word of God, and they knew stuff I didn't know, and I'm like, wait a minute, there's something off here. But I'm so thankful, so thankful. And one of the things that the Lord actually today, and the last time that I looked at this, I thought, oh my stars, because Jess had said something about, hey, I could see that the digging of wells would be something that would really come out in this. And I'm kind of like, well, that's one phrase. I'm not sure that goes through but isn't that how the Lord works? Like finally pulling it all together. And today when I sat down, I'm going, oh my gosh, this is a well, and this is a well. But where this well thing came from is one day Heather we're on staff together, and Heather was sharing, I believe it, with our staff. She said, you know, it's critical to dig your wells deep when you're not in a season of suffering. because then they'll be full of living water when the hard times come. And as I look at this from this story that God has written, did you know that the word actually says that we are to tell our stories? And every single one of you have a story. So I hope you're thinking of what is my story? Because God has written this story. It's a story that I would have never probably picked. But from this vantage point, I am so incredibly thankful for the fruit and the ability to even like Heather said, if there's one nugget that I could pass on that could be a tool to help somebody else, it's just the greatest joy. I believe in looking good at all times. So we're going to start right here where life really, thankfully I was born into a wonderful, loving family. I was the youngest of 4 kids, and I was born in Klamath Falls, so you see I'm a KU Pelican. Oops, we already moved over from that's okay. Heather's running my slides because I figured I'll never get through this if I'm looking at those pictures. But anyway, just a great childhood. I know a lot of you guys did not have a great childhood, and I'm just saying, different people have different seasons that are sweet, but I was blessed in that. And it was at that picture with in the 4th grade, I can remember my dad taking my brother and I up to the upper room at our church before Easter and making sure we knew what Easter was really about. And that was when I truly, for the first time, verbally put my faith in Jesus Christ. I knew that that's what I wanted and made that choice. And I feel like, man, I'm so thankful that I have a touchstone that I can always go back to and go, I did that, it was done, and I'm so thankful. In the middle school, I was kind of really on fire. And I know I just was so thrilled when just a moment before we started, my nieces walked in. And I have to chuckle because you're going to hear an awful lot about Pam in this story. But my sister, so I have a brother that's 4 years older than me, Larry, and then Pam was 8 years older, and then Diane, the loveliness, they'd shoot me. They'd shoot me if they knew I was using this picture. But our family was raised around music. I mean, from the time I was tiny, there was a lot of singing, dancing. I mean, we weren't dancers, but we would dance to the music. And anyway, just a great time. But I can always remember my sister Pam, I kind of drove them nuts because I was so passionate for the Lord at an early age. And I can remember Pam saying to Mom, can you please get her to quit talking about all this God stuff? And what could Mom say, Anyway, ultimately, I'm so thankful because ultimately all of my siblings became Jesus followers. Not saying that it was because of me, but hey, we'll find out when we get to heaven what I had to do with that. High school, I kind of got to have my folks to myself. All the siblings were off to college or on to their professions, and just a great time I loved music. I took piano from the time I was a hatchling, and choirs and all of that. And then my junior year in high school, I was part of starting a drill team. And I have to laugh because I was looking at, it was during high school. My mom had a house cleaning lady. She had severe phlebitis, and so we had this wonderful lady that came in and helped Mom with the house. And she was on fire for the Lord, and she was my mom's best friend, actually, and she was the first one that asked me if I knew that Jesus could be my best friend. And I loved Jesus. I had faith in Jesus, and my parents were people of faith, but I didn't know Jesus could be my best friend, and I loved that concept, And that actually is one of the wells that, as you'll see as the story progresses, that is one of my wells, that the friendship that I have with Jesus, the knowledge that he never leaves me or forsakes me, has been incredibly a gift for many, many years. But I love thinking about that. Today that popped off the page. Oh, it's a well that I can go back to. I dated a lot in high school. I had a lot of fun. I didn't really ever have any serious relationships, but that was a nice way to go into college. All of us con kids, we knew we were going to college. That was a given. We didn't really have a choice. And we were all going to OSU, so we didn't have a choice. And I didn't know people had choices. Oh well. Anyway, when we went, my mother and my sisters and my family had all been involved in the Greek system. And so Mom and my sisters were Alpha Chi's, and so I ended up going through Rush and ended up pledging in the Alpha Chi house at Oregon State. And I got in there and I go, Lord, there are 60 beautiful women on the fast track to hell here. What am I doing? It was like, oh my goodness. And then the next thing he drops into my heart is, and yes, I want you to start a Bible study here. And I said, I haven't ever led a Bible study. There's nobody, I'd be by myself. And he goes, just start a Bible study. I'm going, well, how do you even do that? And it was so, I love the way the Lord is, keep it simple. All you have to do is read the words on the page. You can handle that. And then pray over those girls. Well, I've got to say that, a lot of times there are people there that are hungry, but they don't know how to get up to the next step. And there ended up being like a large Greek Bible study every week, like 100 kids on the OSU campus. And by the time I left the house, there were 18 of us getting together. We're talking the 70s, there was a lot of stuff cooking there. So it was thrilling to be a part of that. And I was out looking for me a man. I thought that's one of the things you went to college for. I was getting a degree in home ec communications, and heck, I didn't really meet anybody at the Bible study, so I went to some of the parties, and you know how lonely it is if you don't drink and you're at a party, and you're just kind of odd, and everybody else is kind of odd, and yeah, that was not fun. So, by my sophomore year, I'd been invited to become a Young Life leader in Salem. And I kind of got a little crush on the Young Life leader. I thought, well, here's a believer guy. God, this ought to work well. And it just didn't go anywhere. And by the end of that summer of my sophomore year in college, I really knew that the Lord was saying, I want you to be content with me. I may never have a husband for you. And so I want you to be content with me. And that was the first time that he had ever dropped my maker's my husband, the Lord God is his name, into my heart. Thought that was kind of weird, but I thought, okay, we'll run with that. So by the time, I was just soaking that in, and I went back that fall. I dropped some weight. I got great grades. I thought, I was really starting to enjoy campus life in a different way. And then I went home for Thanksgiving. Yes, I went home, and Dad and Mom and I had the night of Thanksgiving. We were watching the Waltons. Has anybody ever seen the Waltons? Yeah. That was the night John Boy fell in love. And I had to make a little trip back to my bedroom afterwards and go, Lord, I just got this under control, and then you bring this movie that stirs all this up again, And I go, I surrender that to you. I don't want to go back into that. I trust you. I surrender you. The next morning I get up, and my dad, who was my best friend, anybody who knew my dad, he was just, a nugget. He was a doctor, and when I was little, he would take me on, this was before HIPAA, but I was like Pippi Longstockings, and he'd take me onto calls. I'd go to the hospital with him. He was still doing house calls. He was one of the last doctors in Klamath Falls to quit doing that, and so that was just such a treasure. We'd go fishing together. He only had one son, so I figured I better fill in a little bit there. Anyway, I get up that next morning, and he goes, hey, Sin, how would you like to go haul manure for the garden? Well, what college co-ed wouldn't want to do that? But, I wouldn't want to miss being with my dad. So I said, sure. Nope, didn't comb my hair, didn't put on any makeup or anything. And off we go out to this big cattle ranch, and sitting in this living room with these nice middle-aged people having a nice visit, and in walks one of the most drop-dead gorgeous cowboys you've ever seen in your life. And I'm like, I'm going to kill you later. But anyway, no. So that is where love began, was over a manure pile. I held the sack, he scooped it in, and it was love at first sight. on the way home, I told Dad, I said, why didn't you warn me? And Russ had just come out of a very short but heartbreaking marriage. He'd been married for about 3 months, and then his wife had not wanted to marry a rancher or a veterinarian and cheated, and so he was in the middle of an annulment. And I go, oh, okay, well, that must not have been a twinkle in his eye. So I'll put that behind me. But that night, Russ called and asked me to go out. And so I just said to the Lord, I go, I'm the one that is always going on these dates, and I'm always putting out feelers to see if these guys are believers. And it's just not, I don't ever want to do that again. If this guy if he doesn't bring up his faith, that he has faith, I'm not going out again. Thankfully, Russ brought it up that night, and he shared his story about what he'd just been through, and so we tentatively began a wonderful, wonderful thing. And another well that comes in here was that surrender again in that bedroom the night before I met him, just knowing that I had laid that back down and surrendered that to the Lord. So the confidence that I could move forward in developing a friendship or a relationship was great. And another well that has popped out of this is prayer. From the time I met Russ, of course, this is in the day, if you can imagine, let me get out my cane, is like no cell phones, very expensive long distance. So I could go home to Klamath once a month, and we wrote letters once a week, and we could talk on the phone once a week for cost-wise. So when I would go home to Klamath, I just said, Lord, if this is not from you, ebb it out. And do it on both sides so nobody gets hurt. Well, prayer is a well that I look back in and I think, oh my goodness, thank heavens that those things were surrendered to you, like holding it loosely. Because by January, I'm going home to the cattleman's dance. Now, it's a big deal then. It's the bull sale and the cattleman's dance. I know, I'm stepping into a whole new world too, I understand. But obviously when you're stepping into it with this, you're gonna step into it. But anyway, so I get down there and I'm really excited. I've been looking forward to this dance, new outfit, the whole Mary Ann, and Russ was so off that night. It was like, he didn't seem excited to be with me. He didn't want to dance with me as much, and my heart is like breaking. And on the way home, I'm just like, I just asked him flat out. I said, what is going on? Like, why are you so cold? And he just said, I'm just so scared. He said, I keep seeing yellow flashing lights. And he goes, I'm sorry that I ever told you that I loved you. I'll never tell you that I love you again unless I really, really know it. He goes, but right now I'm just so scared. And I went home and I was just brokenhearted. I remember just like crying. In the middle of the night, the Lord goes, so I asked him, I said, do you still want me to go to the bull sale with you? Because you sure didn't treat me like you wanted me to be at the dance. And he goes, yes, I want you to go with me. And so in the middle of the night, the Lord goes, so I want you to tell him that I have given you enough love for the both of you, and he doesn't have to worry about telling you. He loves you. And I'm going, you want me to tell him what? But I did, and so we moved on from there. Isn't it funny, obedience, like, thank you, Lord, for those that you move in our hearts. We always have the choice to move forward or not. So that led into us. We've dated for about 15 months and then got engaged and then had a huge wedding. Both sets of parents coming from Klamath. My dad was a doctor. He knew everyone. It was just a really fun, wonderful time, and off we went. Well, we were going through the redwoods on our honeymoon, and Russ had never mentioned, as he popped a chew of tobacco, that he chewed tobacco. And I thought, okay, I really am entering into a whole new world. But what do? You're married. I know you're probably thinking, well, that's a pretty small thing to adjust to, but believe me, I entered into a whole different culture on this cattle ranch. And I did finish my degree because my dad said, no finishing of the degree, no getting married, because that was my dad's insurance policy for each of us kids. And I feel like that was so prophetic for what I would ultimately go through. Now, when you dream about getting married, did you ever dream that you'd end up driving a tractor and working thousands of heads of cattle with the syringes under your armpits to keep the medicine from freezing? Or I remember when the kids were tiny, my sister-in-laws were in the fields, and I would feed haying crews of like 30 until Heather got to be 10, and then she started feeding the crews, getting the food ready for the crews. And at that point, I think that was when Russ really started going, you know, this is a consuming. We were like, we were Farm Family of the Year. We were in magazines. We were like, there was some pride. You could go into Big R and say, charge it to IF Rodgers and Sons. Let me just tell you, that kind of pride doesn't always end up so well. Ultimately, the farm crisis hit. Thank heavens we had a milk cow, and I had chickens, and we had beef, but there was not money. We couldn't even buy diesel to heat our home. And I remember the days of like somebody in town heard we needed a fireplace and donated one, and we scrounged up bricks. It was a season of like, okay, Lord, I don't know how you're going to do this. But this is another well that the Lord revealed to me, was the well of his constant provision. So faithful. I remember, I loved it because Pam, my sister Pam, she was just a few years older. We were both autumns, if you remember what that was like. And so she was the We Sing. I don't know if any of you know the We Sing, but she wrote the books, the We Sing children's books and tapes. And so she was just a stay-at-home mom who, her husband was in big real estate and it wasn't doing well. And that was how the Lord led her to just kind of get something going, because she was a music major in college. Well, just watching the way the Lord always provided, her kids were just stair steps older than my kids, so their wonderful clothes got handed down to them and to me, and Christmas gifts, we got to just go pick anything out of their things that they were handing down. I know that sounds hard, but it was so beautiful and it was so timely. Heather was born in 1979, Rory was born in 81, and then Rosie in 84. And the night I had Rosie, I had like 5 phlebitis, and my doctor said, they were worried that I would make it, and the doctor said, no more kids for you, if you want to live to raise the ones that you have. And I'm very thankful. I realize 3 kids is a very wonderful number, but when you have to make those decisions, it rubber meets the road. Well, about this time, things were not going well on the ranch. I just realized that as I was putting this together, the sin of idolatry had crept in. My father-in-law and mother-in-law had worked so hard to build this dynasty, and it was a multi-million-dollar operation. But then the farm crisis hit, and there became that place of what were you willing to do to save this ranch? And where Russ always thought as he got older, he would be getting more because he ran all the animal husbandry, but his parents could not let go. And so one day he came in, he goes, send for my transcripts from Washington State. He'd had a full ride scholarship to Washington State. And I go, what? I knew he was smart. I knew he was a hard worker, but, like when he read to the kids and stuff, his English wasn't like, like, who am I? After I went to school, I go, whoa, we really realize who's smart and, who's hanging right in there. Anyway, so that began a journey of him applying to all kinds of scholarships. We froze our interest in the ranch. My family adored him, and my dad was like his best friend, and they all gave him loans, and so off we go into Klamath Falls to see if his brain still worked. And I loved his humility in that. That was our first year, and boy, did they work. And I'm like, wow, that was 13 years of ranching, and now I'm getting to know a whole new part of this man. So that meant after that first year, we moved on to Corvallis. He got accepted at OSU. And, you know, Pam, right before the day we went to look for a rental, Pam calls me and she said, hey, Sin, Rhonda and I have always wanted to buy a rental in a college town. Why don't you look for something to buy? And I'm like, whoa. Oh, but they got us a lovely, simple family home. And that plays into God's provision. Again, the well of God's provision. And I don't know if you've ever done this, but when I was in, I think I was about 18 when God started telling me to journal and to write the first 5 things every day, 5 things that I could be thankful for. And that became a tremendous discipline because there were many years of my life where it's funny, I shouldn't say that there weren't 5 things there. Let's just say that it became harder to see them. Because did you realize, and this is something I've come to understand over the years, that every good gift comes down from the Father of lights. Every good breath of air, every yummy cookie, every hug you get from someone, every one of those things is a gift from God. And so as you start living in that reality, your life starts to change. So I'm so thankful he'd been dropping that into my heart. So we moved to Corvallis, and he starts at OSU, and he starts having these kind of weird things happen. Like at Christmas, we were at the Beals, and they were having a toast. I guess it was New Year's. They had a little toast, a little drink, and Russ, who's 6'3", just hadn't even had a whole little tiny glass, and he dropped to the ground, and he was just writhing in pain, and we're like, not sure what was going on there. And then he kind of rallied around. And he goes, wow, that was really weird. Never happened again. And then in the spring, all of a sudden we thought our dog must have had fleas. We had a little cow dog because he was just excruciatingly, painfully itching on his shins. Well, no, poor old Trouble. He got defleed and everything in the house, but, that was really weird. And so Russ went to summer school. Things were, settled down on all the weird little things going on. And he took the kids deep sea fishing to celebrate the end of summer term. And of course, there's no cell phones at this time, comes roaring into the driveway, drops Heather and Rory off, who are 12 and 9 at this time. Rosie had stayed home with me, and said, I'm going to the hospital. I'm in so much pain that I'm going to take Rory, and we're just going to go right up to ER. And I'm shocked, and about an hour later he calls, he said, Cindy, you need to get up here. They found something. And so we got up there and saw the x-rays, and there was a huge tumor the size of a large grapefruit enmeshed between his heart and lungs. Now this is a healthy cowboy that never was sick ever at all. So this is just and many of you know this feeling when your reality, I always kind of felt like, not Cinderella, because she had a tough life, but I felt like I've had such a wonderful life. And all of a sudden, all of that kind of shattered. It wasn't that it disappeared, but it was just like my reality had changed that day. Russ was diagnosed with Hodgkin's disease, started treatment immediately, and that was right before he was getting ready to apply to vet school. So I remember, this is the kind of guy he was. He was such a fighter. We went through all the neighborhoods trying to get signatures to save the vet school. The funding was gone for that, and I remember him going to the state legislature and testifying on that behalf. Oh, thank you. But so that's just the kind of guy he was. He got good grades. Even though he was on chemo, and we were just feeling good. High five. The tumor was shrinking. He went in November. It was shrinking, and then Christmas he got his grades, and we were just so thrilled. And I remember he got his grades, and that same day we went into the doctor, and the doctor came back into the room, and he goes, "I'm so sorry. The tumor has defied chemo, and the only hope of your chance you have is if we can get you into Stanford Medical Center for a bone marrow transplant." And we're again, that completely, okay, Lord, okay. And it was amazing, again, that well of God's provision. I remember we had about a week, and if they could get us in. Well, the head Hodgkin's disease guy at Stanford was a Jew, and he didn't celebrate Christmas, so we had an appointment on December 22nd. I mean, it really, you just see God's hand all the way. But the heartbreaking thing for me that year was that we had to leave our 3 kids on the ranch in Klamath because we didn't, and my parents lived down there, and my oldest sisters, because we didn't have any idea what this looked like going to, Stanford. And I remember that was like the city, the country mice going to the city. I mean, whew. So we got down there, and he began treatment. And on the way, just in that short of a time, when his diagnosis, he got the results of that test that it was back and growing, he just started going downhill very quickly. And we kind of called him Lazarus because he'd get to like the point of death and then he'd kind of rally. And then, so I'm just like taking this super sick man down to this big city. And thankfully my car died on the day of his diagnosis. So Pam had given me the Weesing van. We went luxury. Everybody thought I was the Weesing lady, but I just rode on that for a little while. But anyway, we get down there and get him started. And I remember being how many of you have been in the fog of shock and grief? You get it. The fog, it's a fog. And I was my kids, it's Christmas, my kids are in Klamath. My husband is fighting for his life. And I'm in the laundry room of this Flora Hewlett, thank you, Lord, that has an apartment complex for critically ill people. For $10 a day, you could stay in this nice little apartment place. But I'm in the laundry room, and I'm just like, God, I need help. I can't even think of how to pay the next bill or how to get Russ to where he needs to go next. And into my heart drops this verse, Psalm 32:8. And honestly, I tell you the truth, I did not know this verse, but into my heart drops, I will lead you in the way that you should go, and I will counsel you with my eye. And I'm like, what? That sounds like a Bible verse. I don't know, I'm like that. And then the next words were, just do the next 15 minutes. And I thought, it went into my heart in a way that I thought, I can do the next 15 minutes. And immediately that became a lifestyle. It is a lifestyle to this day of just like, what do you want me to do next, Lord? And when you're in the midst of trauma, sometimes it's good times and you've just got a lot on your plate. But when you're in the midst of trauma, sometimes it gets down to like the next minute. God, show me how to do the next minute, the next thing. That has been, I'm so thankful that is a deep well that I have rested in many a time. It's funny, I don't know how many of you are familiar, and I don't want to weird anybody out, you can come up and talk to me later, but I had never heard or understood about the baptism of the Holy Spirit. But when you're critically ill, when your husband is critically ill and you're living in an apartment complex where everybody is waiting for transplants or just coming out of transplants, when someone walks up to you and says, would you like to come to a Bible study for critically ill people? You're like, I'm in, we're there. And when we went to these people's house, they were like the kindest, gentlest, not weird people. And they did a little Bible study, and then the man prayed for healing for those of us there that had, had a partner or whatever that were sick. And then he explained about the Holy Spirit, and he said, you are welcome to go into the different rooms of our home and just pray. Life-changing, deep well for me. And I feel like it's related to the 15-minute plan, because realistically, it's like we know when we get saved, we know we have Jesus. But Jesus says, I have to go away so I can send to you the helper. And the helper's the one that stays with it, who comforts us, who leads us and guides us. My life changed. And it was a beginning process, but that was a beginning point. Like, I am so incredibly grateful for that. And that was at Stanford in the one of the darkest seasons of our lives. By the end of this, I know there's so many stories, and we didn't bring our pajamas, did we, to have a slumber party? But, you'll have to give me the signal when it's wrap it up. But this is like, I don't often tell this story, but so we finally in February was done with all the radiation, and they let us go home to Klamath Falls to see our kids. And of course, it's the worst blizzard that Oregon had in tens of years, and the roofs in the malls were collapsing. I mean, so we're out on this cattle ranch. My folks are in Arizona, and Russ starts having massive heart pain. And I'm like, oh my gosh, but it would come and go. And my dad said, just get in the van and get him back to Stanford as fast as you can. So we we fly back down to California. And we're switching, I don't know if any of you have been to Stanford, but it's like cities. Radiation is a city. Oncology is a huge medical city. I mean, it's like crazy. So we're shifting over to the oncology, the chemo part. And in walks this little girl. She looks like she's, 15, little Mary Jane's on. She's our new doctor. But she was smart. And she said, Mr. Rodgers, I have some good news and not so good news. What would you like first? And we're like, oh, give us the good news. She said, oh, the tumor has not grown while you've been on vacation for a week. And okay, we'll take that. Good. Put it in our pocket. But you have a 4-inch piece of plastic tubing laying in the bottom atrium of your heart. And we're like, oh my gosh. What had happened when we were in Klamath was the part of his portacath, 4-inch piece of tubing dropped off, and actually, most people would have put him into a heart attack. God wasn't done with him yet. And so they whisked him off to surgery. Now, this is Russ. They don't put you out for that. And he wanted to see everything they were doing, so he's like watching the monitor. Well, they couldn't get it. And they were trying, you can only be, thankfully nobody told me this until it was over, but you can only be in the human heart, at least in those days, for 30 minutes before you get into trouble. And they couldn't snare it. So they took it out and they put a lasso on it, which I think this is a great story, and went right in and got it out. And my dad said, Cindy, I couldn't tell you how dangerous this whole procedure was. So one of my favorite things, and it'll come out a little further, is that God holds the number of our days. They're written in the Lamb's Book of Life. And what a confidence that wasn't his time yet. While we were down there, I wanted to say, too, the miracle, if you ever get prompted to send $5 to somebody that's in a critical situation, don't hesitate. $5, while we were at Stanford, every day, at least 10 cards came in the mail. Sometimes it would be a $5, and it would just be like, we're not forgotten. Somebody sees us. One time, $1,000 in cash fell out of an envelope. I mean, that was our provision. We knew God kept showing us, I got you. I'm covering you in this. One of my favorite stories is, so we're into March. I know because March is my wedding anniversary. It's on the 20th. Russ had been in the hospital, had gotten the chemo 7, so he was out of it. And they finally rallied him enough for me to get him to our apartment, and then he crashed, and I get this phone call. And it's the dean of the OSU Vet School, and he goes, I just wanted to tell you that I wanted to encourage Russ, all the funding passed, and the school's up and running. And then he goes, how would you like to be the wife of a veterinarian? Russ had been accepted to vet school at OSU without even going through the interview process. He didn't even do his senior year. They'd just seen God in him, the quality of a man that he was in the fight. And I thought, oh my goodness, Lord, to give us, he was a fighter, but that gave him another thing, another hope to fight for. During the bone marrow transplant, we got to bring our kids down. And because it's called Dying to Live, so we figured, that month before the transplant, we wanted us to all be together. And for our family, we knew that worshiping or playing the piano and singing songs, that was when, Maranatha and all the first Christian songs were coming out. And so it was like, wow, it was water to our souls. And I remember, I don't know how many of you have experienced this, but it breaks the power of darkness. Like when you're depressed or when you're just fighting to take the next breath, sometimes just turning on one of the songs and making yourself sing it will break that power. And Russ knew that, and Russ could not carry a tune in a bucket. Obviously, I can't sing like Heather, but that came from my side of the family. Anyway, so we would he'd say, call the kids, we need to sing, we need to worship. And even at Stanford, I sat for my guitar, and man, we would just gather around to fight through the darkness at that point. So praise the Lord, he made it through the transplant. He was one of the record breakers. He got out of Stanford in 13 days. He says, you cannot keep me in that isolation room one more day. I'm going to exercise. I'm going to drink everything they tell me. I'm going to, and he was such a gift to all of us. I mean, he was called the gentle giant. He was so kind. So we get to move back to Corvallis, and vet school begins, and just so hopeful for him. He does his first year. We have to pack up the whole house and move to Pullman, Washington, because they didn't have a small animal park down there then. Well, we're all packed up. Our whole house is packed in our little home that Pam had purchased for us. And praise God that she'd purchased that, because then we didn't have to move our stuff out of it all the time we were at Stanford. I mean, you just see God's provision again, that deep well. But we go to the doctor. We're ready to move within the next couple of days. The doctor comes in and he goes, the Hodgkin's is back, and something's wrong with your blood. We need to get you back to Stanford. And we're like, we're moving in 2 days, So we ended up feeling like the Lord would have us move. And Heather and I were in our van, and we sang. The other kids were with Russ in the big moving van, but we had our We Sing band, and we were singing worship songs all the way up the Columbia Gorge, just like, Lord, the name of the Lord is a strong tower, the righteous run into it, and they will be safe. I mean, if you haven't ever tried this, clinging to, washing yourself with those words of faith, try it, because God gives it to us for a reason. We get up to Pullman. Russ has to fly to Stanford. I have to laugh. They take a little dustpan and snippers in there to find out what's going on, and he has 11 tumors throughout his abdomen. We've just started 3 kids in 3 new schools in a new town, and they send us to an oncologist in Pullman, and we named him Dr. Death. If you have a doctor that's called if you're naming him Dr. Death, you might want to find another doctor. First time we go in there, he goes, what are you doing? You need to be taking your kids, you need to go back to the farm, get your affairs in order. You don't know if you have 3 days to 3 years to live. And I remember I had to pick up the kids from school, and I put on giant sunglasses hoping they wouldn't see what I was going through. But got home to our apartment, to our little house we'd rented up there, and I'm like, God, where did we miss the turn? Where didn't we hear you? I mean, we're doing the 15-minute plan. And I'm laying on our floor in the living room, and I feel like the enemy is just running around this house. And the phone rings. It's the Jewish oncologist who'd been on a fishing sabbatical in Idaho and had heard about Russ. And he said, Russ Rodgers, you get up tomorrow and you start vet school and you put one foot in front of the other until you can no longer move. Well, I mean, God speaks in such mysterious ways, but Russ got up and he went to vet school. I cleaned houses and taught piano lessons, and within just a couple of weeks, Russ ends up in really critical condition in Lewiston, Idaho. And this is a point, I love this part of the story, because when you drive to the hospital because your husband is so sick, and they tell you, don't even unload him, we can't take care of how bad he is, just drive him straight to Lewiston. And we drove by the house. I said to Heather, call everybody you know to pray. And they started praying and got Russ into the hospital. They got it under control down there, but he's in the hospital for like a week. And her choir director was an on-fire believer, and their church really believed in healing, and they were going to bat for Russ. And so they said, when Russ gets out of the hospital, could you have him drop by the pastor's office? He wonders, just wants to meet him. And so we went in, and that pastor prayed over Russ. And to this day, my son went up there a few years ago, and the pastor said, until this day, I've never had anything happen like that, again, where the power of God fell so heavily in this guy's office. All 11 of the tumors were gone. Go figure, all 11 of the tumors were gone. And we're like, oh my goodness. So, praise the Lord. I mean, so, okay, let's get this party started. And he did his year and a half up there, and we ended up moving back. Oh, while we're up there, though, when we were at Stanford, we had to sign our power of attorney off on this ranch. While we're in Pullman, the sheriff comes to our door, and he served us. And I'm sad to say that I threw all those papers away once this was all over because it was too miserable. And now I'm wanting the real truth, so I have to dig this all out again. But for some reason, they were serving us. And when we moved back to Corvallis, right at this time, my sister Pam calls me and she said, hey, Sin, have you seen the front page of the Oregonian? And I said, no, Pam, we can't afford the Oregonian. What's going on? And she said, the whole front page of the Oregonian is I.F. Rodgers and Sons, armed Montana militia standoff with state police. So my in-laws had gotten involved with the Montana militia, which is a paramilitary anti-government organization, because, and this is where the Lord really brought this to me just this week. It's that idolatry, anything that has such a grip on you that you will go to any measure to hang on to it, becomes a very dangerous thing that will not only hurt you, but it will hurt everybody around you. And that's what happened is they lost that farm on the courthouse steps for nothing. And in the midst of it, they went bankrupt doing it. My husband would never sign the bankruptcy papers because he was not there, but they never asked him. Anyway, those are just like, who has this life? Like Montana militia, armed people. And praise the Lord we weren't there, but anyway, so we're back in Corvallis, great season. Russ graduates. Heather graduates. Do we have, oh yes, that one is our family picture before this one was our family. They're both getting ready to graduate. This is Russ graduating from vet school. And it was so exciting because those professors couldn't give him special attention, but they were watching him. And when he graduated to a standing ovation to the entire LaSalle Stewart Center. And he walked across that stage and he gave glory he had his hand up and he was just giving glory to the Lord. It was just, what a gift, what a gift. So then we're like, okay, his dream is to work large animals. We get 2 job offers. One is in Klamath Falls and one is in Lakeview, Oregon. Has anybody ever been to Lakeview? I know you kids been to Lakeview. Okay, I went down there and let me just tell you, there was one stoplight in the town. And I'm like, you want us to come where? But I felt like Heather was graduating for high school, heading on to college. I knew I needed to take Rosie and Rory down to, it was only fair with all they'd been through. Like, if they just hated it there, we would go to Klamath because that's where family was. And right before we went down there, one of those sorority sisters heard we were looking down there, and just so happens her brother had a huge cattle ranch down there, and there was this really amazing house, like 4-bedroom, 25 acres, beautiful views, 2 barns, $600 a month. Yep, we could do that, So I took the kids down. We drove. Has anybody ever been to Paisley, Oregon? Okay, Paisley, yes. We just happened to cruise through Paisley on the weekend of the home of the Mosquito Festival. Now, that doesn't make you want to move on down there, Anyway, funny, that weekend, I showed the kids around. We went by that house where he's going, I could do this, 400 square foot bedroom above the garage. He goes, he's going to be a freshman in high school, or a sophomore in high school. Anyway, we get done down there, and we go to church that Sunday, and there's a guest speaker, and she's just saying, are you willing to go where God calls you? Are you willing to go on the mission field wherever God calls you? And I get in the car, and my little 8th grade daughter at that time just breaks down in tears. She goes, Mom, I feel like God was calling us on to come on the mission field to Lakeview. I don't think she really wanted to move there, but she goes, I just know we're supposed to. Anyway, we end up at Lakeview. And it actually was God knows us better than we know ourselves. What a season. You know, Russ was there. They ended up wanting him to get take the California boards. And Russ when he took the job, he said, you don't expect me to take the California boards, do you? Because that's like the 95% of the people that take them the first time fail. And he'd been through so much, and they go, no. Well, then we were there a year, and they said, yep, we want you to take the California board. So we go down, and out of the 10 Oregon State students, he's the only one that passes. We thought it was really weird when we got back because nobody in the clinic was excited that he passed. They were trying to get rid of him. And the deal is like if a patient came in, the people wanted him to pray with them, he would pray with them, and he was always just exuded the Lord, and I'm pretty sure that's even the other vets' kids ran to Russ, you know, and so I come to pick him up for lunch one day, and he goes, you're never gonna believe this. They've let me go. I just taken 2 kids to school to start in a new school, and I love it how the Word of God is such a deep well. You never know when it's going to take care of you. But right then that Romans 8:28, all things work to the good for those who love the Lord and are called according to his purposes. I will use this too for your good. And I said that to Russ, and he goes, okay. He goes, well, I'm going to work they didn't want me to work any more days here, but I'm going to work 2 weeks. And he goes, I just feel like if 7 ranchers come to me without knowing that I'm not employed here anymore, wanting me to take them on, I'll know I'm supposed to start my own vet clinic. And I'm going, oh, we're going to start our own vet clinic. Okay, well, crazy thing in this little, Lakeview is the large animal capital of the Pacific Northwest. So, 7 big ranches did come to him within 2 weeks. And we go, okay, well, how are we going to do this? We have no money. We're $80,000 in debt to the vet school. I'm like, next step, Lord, show us the, 15-minute plan. And then we find out that very week that a little old aunt that we thought was poor as a church mouse left him $18,000. Well, to start a vet clinic, but we got the bare bones vet clinic done. And do you know, in that vet clinic, how many of you have ever helped spay a ferret? My life took on a whole new turn. When Petunia and Pansy were brought in, the little skunks, and I got to help spay them, I thought, life is never dull here. I had told Russ, I will do your books, I will clean your cages, but I will not drill bones. Like, if anybody's got one of those kind of broken bones, I'm not doing that. And one day, a prize cow dog came in, and I heard Russ call me down there, and he goes, sterilize up, glove up and everything. I thought I was just assisting with the surgery, just like what I signed up for. And the next thing I know is he said, okay, get the drill, and I'm going to hold this, and you're going to be the one. And I go, but I told you I don't want to ever do that. And he goes, well, do you see anybody else around here that can help in this? And I have to tell you, that was one of the most thrilling things when that dog completely restored and got to go back to what it did. I look at those years. Those were years when you did things, you saw things you never dreamed you would do. We went to a little Calvary down there. It was 10 people above the dollar store. But one of them just so happened to be this 11-year-old boy that the minute my 12-year-old girl walked into the room, fell head over in heels in love with her, annoyed her to no end. But he fell head over in heels. He ended up being teching in our clinic. Well, he is my son-in-law. He is one of just such a gift to us all. But it's just so fascinating how things work. And Rory had the gift of evangelism. He went down there and he knew that he was to start a Bible study at the high school. Our first Christmas in Lakeview, he goes, Mom, can I have a snow party? And I said, sure. He invited about 60 people. And I said, sure, because we had that big ranch and that big house, of course. And then that morning, I remember Heather coming out for breakfast. He goes, Heather, will you help me do worship tonight? He goes, I feel like I'm supposed to give a gospel message. And we're all like, who are you? But we're just new to this town. Well, that night, 40 kids raised their hand to accept Jesus in his 400 square foot bedroom. It was amazing. And that's been the story of his life. But so that was a great season. I thought it was 4 years, but as I've gone back through this and written this all out, we only had that clinic for 3 years. And then in the spring, at Christmas of 2000, I guess it was New Year's of 2001, Russ told the girls, he goes, I'm going to go I want to get your mom a bigger ring to celebrate all those toilets she cleaned for vet school. And I thought, this was our 25th wedding anniversary, and I thought, well, okay. Oh, this is probably asking me if I fell down, because I got so excited. No, I did not fall down. Fell, but okay, all right. Anyway, so that was pretty exciting. But I did the books, and there was no way that we were going to get in debt over a ring. And so we went to Reno because it was close to Lakeview, and we went to Calvary down there, and then went to a few pawn shops, and we got this beautiful ring. Only the one I picked it out, had a smaller diamond, and he looked at me and he goes, "We can get that ring, but we're getting a bigger diamond because it's going to last a lifetime." Well, I didn't know that in 2 weeks, he went out to sew up a miniature horse in a blizzard, and I get a call from my mother-in-law. By that time, we have cell phones. They're this big, and he has one in his truck. And I didn't know the ranch he was going to, but he went out to sew up this miniature horse, and he wasn't getting back. But we were preparing for Easter. I had a friend out, and we were preparing music for the Easter service. And his mom calls me, and she goes, "Cindy, I just got a call from Russ. It was so strange. He just said, stroke, so cold." And I got off the phone, and we just called. I just said, called the sheriffs. I called 911. I didn't even know where he was to send them. And at that time, Rosie pulled in from high school, and we just headed straight to the hospital. And by the time we got to the hospital, I remember in Lakeview, so many believers had heard and had already gathered in and were just praying because they couldn't find him. When I walked into the hospital, the loudspeaker was the chatter from the sheriff's car saying, "We still haven't been able to find him." And anyway, that night, Russ was air-lifed out for the first time. He'd had a massive bleed, and he was only 47 years old. And the kids, Heather and Rory, they tried to find them at Oregon State and get them down. And Rosie came up, and he was such a fighter. I remember that Rory was going to the School of Ministry in Corvallis at the time, and they just said to him, "You go help your mom. That's the kind of school of ministry we want you to have." And so Rory and I moved into a fifth wheel on the St. Charles parking lot, and Rory worked with rehabbing Russ, and Russ was just, fighting so hard at that point. And so within 5 weeks, we got to go home, and it was looking good. He was talking to the doctors in St. Charles, trying to diagnose their patients. They'd tell them about, "Oh, my dog has this problem," and I thought, "Oh, maybe this is going to turn around. Maybe there's hope." And we got home, and we even got to go over to Klamath to a little niece's graduation from high school, and we ran into this family that had been part of putting on this huge fundraiser for Russ when we were down at Stanford. And this little girl had gone to high school with Rory, and it was just fun to meet with that family again, and then we went our way. And within another couple of weeks, Russ, his foot started to drop, and because of his medical training, he knew that things were not good, and it was a Friday night, and I remember we took him into the hospital. The PTs said, "No, we got to get him back up to Bend." And so, we were air-lifed out a second time, but our whole little church, our whole little Calvary came into his room, and I think he knew because he was just blessing people and speaking words over people. And we went back up to Bend, and within a few days, he had gone into a coma, and the doctors, what do you do at a time like that? "Lord, lead me in the way that I should go, counsel me with your eye." And it's like where you have an opportunity. The doctor said, if it were my loved one, I would go for the surgery and see if we can stop this bleed. Well, they stopped the bleed, but within a few days, there wasn't any brain activity. And we're, as a family, all my family is there, and we're all praying and we're worshiping and we're believing because he healed him of 11 tumors. We've seen the miraculous. But, at one point, the kids and I all were on the same page, and we knew that if God wanted to breathe life into Russ, he didn't need the life supports because they were they were preparing us to take him off life supports. And, just again, we go back to those verses in the Bible about how that your number of days have been written in the Lamb's Book of Life. If this isn't God's time for Rory or for Russ, it's not going to happen. And so we gathered around, and they warned me. They said it can be a kind of a brutal experience. It can take 2 days, and we're gathered around his bed. One of my family members just wasn't there because they were mad. They were mad at God, and they were in the chapel, and they needed their dad, and they were crying out for intervention. And I just want to say to you, God knows if you're mad at him or if you're upset. You run to him. Don't run away from him, but run to him with your emotions and your frustration. Because this child is very, very, the way she grieved was different than the rest of us, but it has given me in the ability to minister to other grieving people. I now know, man, that is absolutely okay, because we grieve differently as long as we're running to God with what we're thinking. But I'm standing at this beautiful man's bedside, and if anybody is going to step into heaven beautifully, he did it. He just took a few gentle breaths and stepped into heaven. And I'm standing there with everybody watching the reaction, and I felt God say, if you really believe what you say you believe, you will celebrate. You will have a party today, and you will celebrate this day. So that's what we did. We just said, we went back to the hotel, and we cried, and we laughed, and we swam, and we told stories. The day of the memorial, these are the pictures of the day. My kids did the worship at the memorial, and Rory preached a gospel message. And vets from all over the state came. People came to this little tiny town. There were like 400 plus people in this memorial, and 19 people gave their hearts to Jesus that day. And we're like, are we willing to lay down our lives that someone else would come to know the Lord? I mean, not that Russ chose that, but Russ chose the way he lived his life, so that those people were there to see. What a perspective. I had to close the clinic a month later, and I had to count every pill and sell every piece of equipment, and I wake up the day I'm supposed to take it all to Klamath, and it's 9/11. The kids are all sitting around the TV, and they're going, Mom, look what happened. And I thought, God just showed me that I do not have the corner on the market of suffering, that there is suffering all around us. And when I looked at that tragedy, it almost gave me strength to go on. And I don't know if if that makes sense. But anyway, at that memorial, this little family from Klamath came over. And the one with the cute little blonde daughter, and when they left the memorial, the little girl, Lindsay, said, Mom, I want to marry somebody like that. And she just so happened a month later to write Rory and Heather a little note saying, I'm going to be an OSU cheerleader. I'm coming to Oregon State. I want to get plugged into the youth group, so it makes sure I don't fall through the cracks. Rory never showed Heather the letter. He said, I've got this one. I've got this one. They are now married. They are an amazing, she's an amazing gift to our family. But anyway, I want to just wrap up a few things. After this, getting rid of the things from the clinic, I had to have leg surgery. I had really terrible varicose veins, and I was laying in my bed at Pam's house with my feet above my heart for a whole week, and I get this phone call. It's my attorney, and he said, Cindy, he goes, I've got some, are you sitting down? I go, oh yeah, and I've got some rough news. The bankruptcy courts are coming after Russ's life insurance. And Russ did have life insurance from the vet school, and I go, well, Lord, I gave you my husband, and that was his provision to take care of me. Like, that doesn't seem, and then then in my head, I'm like, oh, that's right, I didn't really give you my husband, but this is the way, you kind of comprehend. And then it hits me. God says, Cindy, since when has your security ever been in a bank account? And I go, you are absolutely right, God. You have been faithful, faithful over and over and over again. And so I did, when I got out of there, I did give the kids each $10,000, and I said, don't spend this because it really doesn't belong to you. They could probably come get this at any point. They came and they took three quarters, a little bit more of that policy. But I'm so grateful because they didn't take that from the kids. I think that would have been a bitter pill for me to swallow. And so we moved on, and it was a short time later that I'm up seeing Rory. It's actually February after Russ passed away. At Christmas, our pastor in Corvallis called Rory and said, hey, I want you to pray about coming on and being our high school pastor. And I'm like, Rory gets off the phone and he goes, Mom, you can't believe this. And in my heart, I'm like, oh man, that means no more vacations at home, no more summers with him here. And the Lord goes, keep your mouth shut and pray your socks off. And I knew that the very best thing, what Rory was created to be, this was what he, the calling on his life. And then I came to visit Rory when he was doing this in February, and Pastor Rob calls and he goes, hey, I had this dream, and I dreamed that we were in this new church and that you were my secretary. But we don't even have a church, and I have a perfectly good secretary. And so I got off the phone, and I go, okay, I'll pray. And then I got off the phone, and I just started praying. I said, Lord, don't ever let him call me again if that's not the best thing for that church and for my family. So the next summer, Rory has high school camp, and so I'm taking a bunch of high school kids over there. And I actually, in June, I'd been up to visit again, and I ran into the secretary, his secretary in the rented church parking lot, and I said, hey, Laura, how's it going? She goes, great. She goes, but I feel like I'm supposed to go in the mission field. And she goes, and I have no idea why I'm telling you this, because I haven't even told the staff around here. And I'm like, oh, I know why you're telling me. So I started praying about it. This is June. August, I take all these kids to high school camp, and I'm in the nurse's cabin. They're going to play night games. It's 11. I've had enough. I go to bed. I've got hysterical pajamas on because that's what you wear when you go to high school camp, right? They have big, giant sunglasses, and crawl into my little bunk, and this big, wet, slimy thing lands on my face. And I'm like, I slung it off on my face, and I'm thinking, oh, I got to get up. And you do not sleep with something like that roaming around. I don't know what it was, and I found it was a big old frog. And so I picked it up, and I walked to the front door of the cabin, and I swing it open, and I go like this, and as close as Jess is to me are 3 of the Calvary pastors. They're there to ask me to come on staff to do the, there is never time. I don't usually pray for humility. I think I do enough to put myself in the humbled state without that. But what a kind and wonderful God that I got to move into this incredible place, and where I was healed and surrounded, and my son worked there, and just a healing time. And 5 months after I started being the secretary, I started noticing, like, for a church of 450, there's nothing going on in women's ministry here. Well, that's kind of weird, but oh well, I don't know. about 2 weeks later, Rob calls me up after a Thursday night service, and he goes, hey, I just really have it on my heart that you should pray about taking on our women's ministry. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I'll pray about it. And I'm like, and in my head I'm going, but I don't have a theological degree. And like, Lord, was this a wrong number? And, but the incredible thing was, and this is a word of encouragement for someone, because God just said, no, but you loved me as a child, as a daughter, as a college student, as a wife, as a mother, and now as a widow. I just want to use that. I just want to use your love for me through those seasons. I said, sign me up. I can do that. So that has been just absolutely life-giving to me. And then to my son, it moved on to become a senior pastor in Prineville. And the year that he moved on, he had one of my grandchildren started. But Heather was hired on, and so those staff meetings never changed. I still had a wonderful child there to share life with. I mean, who gets to do that? So I did want to share that, I am wrapping my story up here, but so my family, my sisters and I were extremely close. My brother and I, thankfully, now are very close, which has not been since our teens. But in the fall of 2008, my sister Pam was getting ready for her son's wedding, went in because she thought she had a bad cold, went in on the Friday before the rehearsal dinner, and was admitted on Monday to OHSU with acute myelogenous leukemia. And we're just like, what? This woman that is just like vibrant, Pam is the one on the right, Diane is the one in the middle, and then those are my girls. So the fight began for Pam's life, and what the miracle was that I was a perfect match to be her donor. So, what a thrilling experience that was. I know that sounds weird, but, Russ got to use his own bone marrow. Pam, to give my blood to offer life to somebody else. She was a little scared because we did share the same DNA after that happened, but she said, oh, does that mean I'm going to be like you? But anyway, so she got completely healed. I mean, it was a miracle. The next year, my oldest sister, Diane, the exact a year later, was diagnosed with the same acute myelogenous leukemia, and there was not a match. And so the following January, she stepped into heaven. And so, you're just like, wow, all this loved ones lost, the battle with cancer, the victories, the life. You guys know, many of you know what this looks like. But, thinking about how in the midst of all this, God provides just this amazing home for me. I've never had a house. I was living in an apartment, and then when my dad got sick, before Pam passed away, I was glad Dad wasn't around to have to watch that. Dad provided enough for me to find a house, and I went looking for a house, and I didn't know that it was uncommon to look at 51 houses. My realtor was my friend and said, we're not going to settle. What do you want, Sin? I said, I just need a view and, just some country to look at. And, just the amazing miracle of this. I found one house that I made an offer on and it already sold. And I go, I'm not discouraged. At least I know there's something I can afford out there. So my friend and I went out the next day. And I said, let's just drive around out here in Adair Village. Let's see if there's anything out kind of country-like. And I'm driving by this cul-de-sac, and I look down the end of it, and there's nothing on either side of this house. It just goes on and on forever. I said, I think I should go down there and look at that. But the house wasn't for sale. And I get back to the car, and I go, Sherry, I think we're supposed to pray. I'm going to go ask them if they'd be willing to sell their house. So I pull up to the door, and I knock, and I'm thinking, oh, who does this? But I did this. And this little mom comes out, and I said, I know this is really weird, but is there any way you'd be interested in selling your home? And her jaw just drops, and she goes, we just finished doing all the paperwork online to sell it ourselves. Would you like to come in and look? Oh my goodness, $45,000 cheaper than the other one that we looked at 5 houses away. It has been my oasis. It's just a gift for me. I share that story for, I don't know where you are in your life journeys, but God wants to do the unexpected. And he wants to bless you when you least expect it. Just keep trusting him. Keep pressing in. The last couple things, I just want to, for Heather, one day she'll probably be up here doing a story night. Yeah, so I'm just giving you a teaser on her life. But we prayed for Heather. For Heather and I, when Russ passed away, my prayer for the both of us was, God, keep anyone out of our courts that's going to dabble with our hearts. Don't let anybody in. And Heather had some relationships, but just nothing that was right. And so she was really quite to a point of, like, we were living together in this house that was our oasis. And then she meets this man at the week of prayer and fasting, and she thought he was a lot younger than her, so she just wanted to be friends. He had the gift of evangelism. She wanted to know a little more. Well, long story short, this amazing guy with a story that you ought to hear sometime walked into our lives, and Joseph became a very significant part of our future. But the week before Joseph was going to propose to Heather, he'd invited me to go with him when they looked for a ring. What mother-in-law wouldn't love this guy? The week before, he ends up in the hospital. Healthy guy, super healthy guy, ends up in the hospital. He has the same cancer my husband had. At this point, I was like, I think there's something wrong with me, because I was not doing well with this one. I remember sitting at the desk at Calvary Chapel Corvallis telling the staff, if he's got the same cancer as us, God cannot do that. The phone rings, and I get that news. And I thought, if you have ever considered counseling, there was a season in life when it was weakness. No, you don't get counseling, but the deal is if you need Christian counseling, it can be a life vein. And at this point, when we found out that Joseph needed a bone marrow transplant to survive, I said, I can't do this again. God, you got to help me through this. And he led me to an incredible counselor. Heather had a separate one that did a tremendous, and Heather walked through her own fire, and her own story is different. Anyway, all of that, life is wonderful, life is painful. These are pictures of my family now. My quiver is expanded. That's my son and his family. Thank you for listening to my story. I just want you to know, I just want to close with Psalm 16:11. You will show me the path of life, and in your presence is the fullness of joy. At your right hand are pleasures forevermore. Cling to the word. Put the word into your wells. Get your prayer partners going now while things are good. Be praying for them, because you'll be ready. God will never leave you or forsake you. Let me just pray over you. God, I just pray over each woman that's here tonight, Lord. And if there's in any way has been a raw spot touched, Lord, I just pray that you would minister deeply to them. God, I pray that you would show them how to walk this walk, how to walk the 15-minute plan, to stay close to you, Lord. And I just pray blessings over each one of them. In Jesus' name, amen.
This is a healing kind of love. Wonderful Counselor, the government is resting on your shoulders. You are the final word. You alone decide when every page will turn. So I will trust your timing. I will rest secure. Oh, this is a steady kind of life. Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, Emmanuel, God with us, you're here with me. Wonderful Counselor, the government is resting on your shoulders. Your name, say it, all they say it, all I stand in awe of you. Your name, say it, all they say it, all I stand in awe of you. Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, Emmanuel, God with us, you're here with me. Wonderful Counselor, the government is resting on your shoulders. Your name, say it, all they say it, all I stand in awe of you. Your name, say it, all they say it, all I stand in awe of you. Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace, Emmanuel, God with us, you're here with me. Wonderful Counselor, the government is resting on your shoulders. And I am too, I am too, I am too.
Thank you, Heather, and thank you, Cindy. If we could give both of them one more round of applause, that would be amazing. I met Cindy a few summers ago, and she's just been an amazing mentor and leader. She kind of takes on all of us other women's ministry, Calvary ladies. Every summer we get to go and just be encouraged by her. And as she said, we have these stories for a purpose, and we hope you were blessed and encouraged by them. Maybe even think about sharing your own story in some way. It doesn't have to be on this stage, but somebody needs to hear your story, whether that's today or in the future. And we do have another one coming up. Now, don't let this photo fool you. She looks very calm and gentle and precious, and she has got a spicy personality. So Joan is over at the back table. I was wondering if I could steal you on stage just for like 30 seconds to introduce yourself to the ladies. You can mark your calendars. This is coming up on July 11th is 7-Eleven. Apparently they have like a 7-Eleven Slurpee Day or something. A little did I know. I was trying to make sure I didn't conflict with anything major, and that was the response I got from the staff team, that there's a 7-Eleven Slurpee Day. Would you introduce yourself to everybody?
Never talked in one of these. Am I doing it right? She's a bit persuasive. This isn't my thing, but I'm going to do it. So I'm Joan, and I have a story a little different. I call it saying no to God. And I'm pretty good at that. So I hope you can come out and hear what that one's about.
I know, I feel like we heard all about saying yes to God. Now you just watch what happens when Joan tries to say no to God. It's going to be fun. So mark your calendars. For those of you who've been here before, you know how this works. If you check your email, there's a link to register, and the first handful of women who register for the July 11th story night will get some prizes up here. So you can grab your phone and you can start doing that right now. So I will check my computer here in just a moment and give out those prizes for our first ladies who register. But while you're doing that, I wanted to mention one quick thing. For those of you who are maybe feeling like you'd love to just spend more time with women and dig some more deep wells and get encouraged to do the next 15 minutes and all of those things, we have a retreat coming up next month in April, 19th through 21st. Our new pastor's wife is going to be the one teaching there. And we have some more scholarships. So I would love to raffle off some free retreats if you feel like you can make that weekend and go up to the Christian Renewal Center. It's in Silverton, right by Silver Falls, and beautiful. So there are little pieces of paper on your table. And if you don't have a pen on you, there should be little pencils in the chairs behind you. So if you would like to be entered for a chance to get a free retreat, just write your name on there, and we're gonna get it into this wonderful bag here, okay? So I'm gonna kind of send this bag around through all of the tables and draw some names. I'm gonna start this all the way over here and send this bag around if you want to be entered for a chance for a free retreat. And now I'm gonna check on and see who might get these wonderful prizes. We have 5 prizes up here, and of course my internet's gonna take a minute to wake up. All right, it's giving me the circle, which means go ahead and pray and then it'll wake up. So ladies, I just wanna pray over all of you tonight and give a chance to let you know that there are going to be a few ladies up front. If there's something going on in your life, if you're in one of those seasons where you can barely do the next 2 minutes and you'd like somebody to pray with you, we're going to have some ladies up front that are available for that. And I'm hoping you'll join me in prayer too, as one of our ladies here tonight ended up having to leave with a blood pressure issue. So we've got some things to pray about. God, I want to thank you so much for tonight. Thank you for Cindy's story.